Now imagine the scene. In the luxurious hall of a mansion in Arraial das Palmeiras, a young woman named Cecilia, a humble and dignified maid, finds herself forced to play the piano in the middle of her boss's party, Myrna Duarte, a woman known for her air of superiority. The intention? Simple, to humiliate her in front of high society guests. But what no one could have predicted was the outcome. Cecilia, with her hands shaking with nerves and her heart pounding, transforms that moment of mockery into pure art, drawing tears and applause from those who had previously looked at her with disdain. It is in these twists and turns that life teaches us. Those who try to belittle others often end up watching them shine. And this story will prove to you that, on the stage of life, even humiliation can become liberation. That night in Arraial das Palmeiras, the hall seemed to shine brighter than ever, with imposing chandeliers and loud music. But in the midst of so much luxury, Cecilia, wearing a simple uniform and looking downcast, was called by her boss Myrna. The order was clear: show your talent on the piano, Cecilia. Let's entertain our guests. Myrna's tone left no doubt. This was not an invitation, it was a trap to mock the girl. And Cecilia, feeling the weight of humiliation, walked towards the instrument as if carrying the world on her shoulders. The piano shone under the lights, as if it were there to judge. Cecilia sat down, took a deep breath and felt the curious, and even malicious, eyes fixed on her. The first notes came out hesitantly, as if asking permission to exist. The silence in the hall was almost cruel, and the suppressed laughter of some guests echoed like stabs. But at that moment, Cecilia did what no one expected: she closed her eyes and let the music speak for her. Each chord that came from Cecilia's hand seemed to cleanse the atmosphere of evil. What began as a spectacle of mockery gradually became a performance that paralyzed even the most arrogant. The piano, previously an accomplice to humiliation, became her ally. Cecilia played as if she were telling secrets, as if she were transforming pain into poetry. Her dignity rose with each melody, and the party, previously noisy, fell silent in respect. It's curious how art can sometimes turn things around without having to say a single word. That's what happened there. Cecilia, from her simplicity, gave a lesson to that elite group of Arraial das Palmeiras. Myrna, who was expecting laughter, saw the guests with tears in their eyes, enchanted by the girl's sensitivity. The embarrassment gave way to a respect that no one imagined they would feel for that maid. And Cecilia? She kept playing, louder, more in control. As the last notes spread through the air, what was heard was a spontaneous, genuine applause, the kind that comes from the depths of the soul. Cecilia stood up slowly, with the same courage with which she sat on the piano bench. Myrna, for a moment, seemed speechless as the guests approached, praising her unexpected talent. That was when the transformation began, the moment when humiliation turned to applause, and the maid gained a prominent place without ever losing her dignity. What no one at that party knew was that Cecilia cultivated that gift in the silence of the early hours of the morning. Between one task and another around the house, she would sit at the old piano in the back room and let her fingers run over the keys, as if she were unburdening herself without words. Music was her way of surviving the hard routine and, until that moment, it had been her secret. The talent that was now moving everyone was the result of hidden nights and a courage that only the humble know. And that was what enchanted her, the authenticity of someone who plays for the soul and not for the audience. The guests, who had previously been so certain of their superiority, were captivated by the melody like children listening to a magical story. There was something in the notes that Cecilia played that awakened memories, longings, and dormant feelings. It was impossible not to surrender to the purity of that sound. Even the waiter stopped with his tray in the air, mesmerized by the scene. And the most incredible thing? Cecilia didn't even notice the looks. She was lost in the music, in her secret refuge. Myrna, the owner of the house, felt the ground slipping from under her feet as she saw the admiring glances turning toward Cecilia. She, who had planned to humiliate, had just been placed in the role of villain without anyone needing to say a single word. Because there, in that room, Cecilia's music had done more than just move people, it had disarmed pride and torn apart masks. And on the guests' faces, respect grew with each chord. It was then that one of those present, a gray-haired man with an attentive gaze, approached Myrna and asked, "Where did you get this girl from? She deserves a real stage." The man was none other than the director of the Brazilian Popular Music Institute, known for revealing great talents. The comment made Myrna blush and feel the bitter taste of her own prejudice. And there, in that moment, Cecilia's future began to change. The song ended with a breath of hope, leaving a mixture of surprise and emotion in the air. The hall, which had previously been the scene of a trap, became witness to a unique moment. Cecilia stood up, still shy, but with her eyes shining as if she had discovered her own strength. And the applause, this time warmer, confirmed it. A talent that was born hidden, blossomed there in front of everyone, transforming shame into pride. As soon as the last note of the piano faded into the air, the hall was filled with reverent silence. Then, as if awakened by a spell, the guests began to applaud, some still with tears in their eyes. Cecilia, accustomed to going unnoticed, felt her heart race with that wave of recognition. Who would have thought that on that night, planned to be one of humiliation, she would become the center of attention? Life has such ironies. When you least expect it, dignity prevails. Amidst the applause, the gray-haired gentleman, the director of the Brazilian Popular Music Institute, he made his way to Cecilia. With a sincere smile, he extended his hand and said, "You have a rare gift, girl. I would like to talk about your future in music." It was as if an old dream, which Cecilia no longer dared to dream, took shape there, in front of everyone. And that gesture, so simple and true, was worth more than 1,000 words. Myrna, the boss, watched the scene with a mixture of shock and discomfort. Her plan to humiliate the maid had ended up backfiring on her. The eyes that had previously been turned to Cecilia were now directed at her, as if to say, "Why try to extinguish such a beautiful light?" And while Myrna struggled to hide her embarrassment, respect for Cecilia only grew among those present. That hall, a symbol of status, now applauded the talent coming from the outskirts. The director of the institute was excited and talked about the possibilities, scholarships, presentations, classes at the institute, doors that could open for Cecilia. She listened attentively, still unable to believe what was happening. It was as if the music, her old companion in the early hours of the morning, was finally giving her the reward for so much dedication in silence. And the guests, curious and delighted, approached her to congratulate her. Cecilia, with her heart full of gratitude and courage, smiled like she hadn't done in a long time. She felt that something had changed forever that night. The unexpected recognition was not only due to the chords played on the piano, but also due to the strength of someone who knew how to transform pain into art. And as the lights of the hall shone upon her, Cecilia understood, from that moment on, it was time to follow a new path, a path that she herself was beginning to write. The morning after the party, Cecilia woke up with a lighter heart than she had felt in a long time. She looked out the window of her small maid's room and saw the sun rising in Arraial das Palmeiras as a sign of a new beginning. The decision had already been made, it was time to leave. She sat down at her improvised desk and wrote a simple but dignified letter. In it, she thanked Myrna for the job opportunity, but said that the time had come to follow her true calling. When she handed the letter to her mistress, Cecilia kept her gaze firm, serene, and without resentment. Myrna, surprised, read the note in silence and realized, perhaps for the first time, the greatness of that young woman. There was no argument, no harsh words, just an atmosphere of respect that spoke louder than any fight. It was as if Cecilia had finally freed herself from the invisible chains that held her there. And, with sure steps, she left the mansion, taking with her only her own courage. Outside, the world seemed new. Cecilia walked through the city streets with her heart warmed by hope. The director of Brazilian Popular Music Institute I was already waiting for her for the first conversations about classes and projects. Each step was like a note of a new melody that she was beginning to compose. It was the beginning of a journey in which she would teach other young people to transform difficulties into songs of overcoming. At the institute, Cecilia was welcomed with smiles and open doors. She was given a space to teach, a piano to call her own and, most importantly, students who saw in her an example of courage and transformation. Little by little, she began to form small groups of young people from the outskirts of the city, who were enchanted by her stories and learned that music could be a bridge to a better future. Cecilia finally felt at home, not in a physical place, but in the purpose that now guided her days. And so, Cecilia's life took on new meaning. What began as a humiliation became her greatest strength. Each chord taught was like a brick in the construction of something greater, a legacy of dignity, respect and liberation. And as the sounds of the piano echoed through the institute, Arraial das Palmeiras began to get to know and knew Cecilia, no longer the maid, but the teacher, the artist, the woman who dared to transform pain into music. While Cecilia was beginning to follow her new path, the atmosphere in the mansion in Arraial das Palmeiras was no longer the same. The hall, which had previously echoed with laughter and ostentation, now seemed empty, almost cold. Myrna spent her days remembering the scene she had witnessed, the simple maid, bringing tears to her guests' eyes with the piano. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own prejudice and cruelty disguised as a party. And that, my friend, cannot be undone with money. Myrna found herself sitting in the same armchair, looking at the piano she had once used as a weapon of humiliation. The black and white keys seemed to accuse her silently. The sound she had once wanted to ridicule now echoed in her memory like a lesson. And deep down, she knew, she had tried to extinguish a light that should never have been extinguished. Regret began to knock on the door of her conscience, and there was no way to ignore it. The loneliness of the house became even more evident with Cecilia's absence. The servants who remained began to look at Myrna differently, as if they were watching a castle crumble. The atmosphere, previously one of power and control, turned into silence and reflection. Every corner of the mansion reminded the mistress of the night she tried to be superior and ended up small in the face of the greatness of art. It was as if the environment itself was demanding a change. Days passed, and Myrna began to look for ways to redeem herself, still without knowing how. She even visited the Brazilian Popular Music Institute, where she saw Cecilia smiling, surrounded by young people, teaching with passion. That scene remained engraved in her mind as a mirror of what she could have valued but did not know how. Myrna left the institute with her head down, shaken, feeling firsthand what it is like to be a spectator of her own failure. And so, while Cecilia flourished on her new path, Myrna carried the hardest lesson, that respect and dignity cannot be bought, they must be earned. Their story, so intertwined in the beginning, was now heading in different directions. But the echo of that night lived on, like a song that insists on playing in the memory. And, who knows, it might have been the beginning of a transformation in the soul of her former boss as well. Because in life, even villains can learn. And now I ask you, how many times in your life have you felt like Cecilia? Someone trying to put you down, thinking they could dim the shine that exists within you? Well, know this, only you have the power to transform pain into strength, humiliation into achievement. The world will always have people like Myrna, but there will also be stages waiting for your talent. And the choice of how to face the challenges, that choice is yours alone. Are you putting off showing the world what you have best? Sometimes, all you need to do is take the first step, the one that only depends on you. And if Cecilia's story touched your heart, how about doing like her and seeking your own liberation? Don't wait for others to applaud you to start. Transform your life today, right now. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel now. Activate the bell so you don't miss any content that can inspire and transform your journey. Here, each story is an invitation for you to believe more in yourself and take action. Because the stage of life is there, waiting for you to step on it. And the first chord starts now.